Welcome back, everyone, to more Tech Corp here at Pit Gaming. So in our first few videos, we've talked about software contracts and getting started with those, getting started with hardware contracts. We've done manufacturing, outsourcing. We've done a lot of different things, but now it's time to go to a facet of the game that I was really interested in, which is making games. So what I did is start up a new sandbox world just with the basic amount of money. I believe it's 4 or 5 million that you get started off with. And you can see at the top of the screen, we're at about $26.5 million right now. And all we've done is make a few games. About 4 games, I believe, is what we made. And we've come up with this kind of profit. So it is a very big money maker. And in relation to how the other parts of the game work, from software contracts and hardware contracts and all that kind of thing, this is very hands-off in comparison. So we're going to take a look in today's video as how the games work and some of the different options you have when building games. So to get started, we don't need very many employees. We've got a sales executive that we hired first. Then we added a researcher and a marketer. So in order to get started with games, my first thought was I just needed to hire a bunch of programmers and get them started on it somehow that way. It doesn't work that way. You need to purchase a game studio, and the way you do that is through your sales executive. Click on your sales executive. Normally you would be looking at contract types, but instead we're going to search for game studios here at the bottom of the screen. So whenever you click search there, over here on the right hand side of the screen under notifications is where those different companies are going to come up as they become available. Now right now it's a pretty limited choice. They're all level 1, and we'll see that as we move through the video. But don't expect to find huge software houses and operations up and running in the game to be purchased. So with that in mind, the next thing we need to do is hire a researcher, and we need to get them started researching some game topics. Now the game topics are exactly what they sound like. These are the types of games that you can make. So for us, I've already done several. So we're going to pick racing, and they'll go ahead and get started on that as soon as I start time moving once again. Now our marketer, we don't need them just yet. We have to wait till we have a game getting near to release before we start marketing it. But again, very important to have a good marketer. All right, so let's go ahead and start just for a moment, because I want to see if we can find a game studio real quick to purchase. There we go. So it pops up studios for sale. We'll click view, and now we get to see the name, specialty, staff, management, status, which is going to be for sale, and then the max level. I have not seen anything beyond a level 1 to this point. And if I let this go, I usually will end up with somewhere between 5 to 7, maybe 8 game studios in here to purchase. The biggest thing I look for, and I don't have any data to back this up as being better or worse than other levels, but staff, I try to get at least 2 or 3 on the staff. 3 or 4 is about the most I've seen, maybe even just 3. So 2 or 3, if I can get that, that's what I try to go for. But there's really no specifics available that I'm aware of to tell you what any of these particular numbers are for. It made the most sense to me that staff, the more staff you have, the more work you can get done and the quicker you can get it done, but that may not necessarily be the case. So there we go. We already have, for our purposes, we already have a game company. So let's go ahead and under software creation at the bottom of the screen, we click on games. Now, if you don't already own a game studio, then you'll get a message here on this screen that says you need to purchase a game studio. Well, we already have one called We Need Money Incorporated. 3 employees. We're going to select them to work on this game. So very quickly you realize that you can own multiple game companies and have no trouble having several games going at one time. Of course, you're going to need money for all that, but as you continue to grow, you can just keep expanding this as much as you want. So we're going to select them. Now we need to set up what kind of game we're going to make. Okay, for genre, let's go ahead with an action game. And let's see, let's do a horror game. And franchise, I've created Pit Gaming as a brand. So we'll select that one. And then we're going to name our game. We're going to name it Horror Action. We'll just leave it at Horror Action. And it would be nice if I could spell correctly with capitals. There we go. So Horror Action. And basically that's just for me to know what type of game I decided to make, because these are all going to end up under our franchise tag. And as we click on the franchise tag, we'll be able to see our previous games. Now, unfortunately, games that I did before I exited the game on a previous day don't show up anymore. I'm not sure why they wouldn't show up, but the only one that shows up is the most recent one I did right before I started recording, which was called Post Action 2, which was an action game in a post-apocalyptic universe. And you can see how well it did over here on the right-hand side of the screen. It's time to archive that game, but it made 1.6 million, which is actually pretty terrible compared to some of the others that I have done in the past. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move forward. So let's come back to our current game, our horror game. We're going to make the budget here. Let's just make it 1 million even. I have gone way up to 100 million in this and had great success. So you got a lot of leeway here depending on how much money you want to spend. And then our launch, for me, it's been best to go no less than about 65 days. Otherwise, you get into delays if you want to finish the game. So we're going to go ahead and select 70 days. Now, these options at the bottom are grayed out for now. So I believe we've got everything we need here. Budget of 1 million, 70 days out. And we'll click on next. Now we need to set up the specifics of the game, and there are several of them. So first of all, what kind of story do we want to tell? Let's see, it's a horror game. So let's do a tragedy. And then the campaign, how long do you want the campaign to be? I found that 45 hours is a pretty good number, but again, there is no telling exact. There's way too many options for me to nail down which ones are responsible for good games versus games that don't sell so well. So by all means, I'm not trying to steer you that these are the correct answers on any of these. We're going to have quests as side missions. I'm going live orchestra for the sound design. We are sparing no expense on the sound. And the gameplay, we're going to do hardcore. So this is going to get very interesting as the game progresses. A horror game that is hardcore. Dynamic AI. We're going to do motion controls. And let's see. We want to do survival gameplay. I have also chosen PvP, co-op, sandbox, and they've all worked to varying degrees. There seems to be a good bit of randomness to how well the games do, at least as far as I can tell at this particular point. All right, our art priority, we're going to go balanced between characters and environment. Let's do photorealism. I have used pixel art, stylized, and photorealism. And again, they all have seemed to work just fine. Okay, we're going to go player customization on our main character and let people have some option there. And what kind of world do we want? We want a... I'll tell you what, let's do a forest. Horror game in the forest. That certainly wouldn't be anything new. And what type of world? I'm not a big fan of linear worlds. Let's go open world. Love open world games. And then we're going to have some backgrounds available. This doesn't seem to matter a whole lot, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. Let's just get... There we go. There's our forest. And let's see. Okay, I kind of like that. Although that's not a bad one either. Let's go a little bit more colorful. There's the branding and the title for our game there. We can change the fonts around a little bit if we want to. But I think that's what we need. So let's go ahead and click save there. And we've got everything ready to go. Now these bars will fill up. You can see them already starting to fill up. And in the top right-hand corner, you're going to see that the development bar is going to slowly continue towards completion as the different areas of the game are worked on, as the deadline will tick down closer and closer to our release date. Now we see we've got a new game tech that has been discovered with the racing. That's what we had our researcher working on. So we'll go ahead and get them started on the next one, which will be romance. And again, there is no reason that you have to do all of these. It's all about which type of game you want to create. So as you continue to research more of these, they will become available to you when you're creating a new game. Let's go ahead and do Wild West and skip on down a little bit. And you can see it's not going to take very long. And that's because I hired the highest tier employees I could get. That's not necessarily something you have to do. By all means, you can save money by hiring a lower tier employee. But for me, it's worked out quite well. And it keeps me where I need to be for example purposes. So right now, again, we still have nothing for our marketer to do. That's going to happen as we get a little bit closer to our deadline. Okay, so Wild West is done. Let's come back and choose, let's do space. And okay, so now we've come to our marketing budget. We need to set that. You're only going to have to do this one time. And we're going to go ahead and blow the budget. We're just going to do a full $1 million on this. Not necessarily what you might want to do in real life, given that we only spent a $1 million on the game itself, but we're going to go ahead and max this out. So we're going to sell the game for $59, which is a fairly standard price nowadays. I've had luck using more or less than that. So as always, just keep trying different things and see what works for you. Now, as far as my best and worst games that I have sold, I can tell you that pretty much this is a huge moneymaker as long as you don't forget the marketing. So right now you see we're getting closer to our deadline, but we haven't done any marketing. Well, if you forget to do that, then you will have basically no sales. You'll sell like 50 copies of it and lose a ton of money, and it will be horrible for you. And in fact, could bankrupt your business depending on, you know, how extended you are when creating that particular game. So make sure that you choose the marketing, and for that, we click on the marketing person, and we're going to select the game. Of course, we only have one game being developed right now. All right, so we'll go ahead and turn that back on, and you'll see the marketing bar will start to fill up pretty quickly. It doesn't take very long at all for the marketing of the game to be done. In fact, let's click on more, and there you can see our pre-orders will continue to increase as long as the marketing is going on. And now that we're done with the marketing, you will see that the pre-orders will stop. Units in stock, we'll get to that here pretty shortly because our deadline is starting to wind down. But you take a look at our development, it shows that we're nearly complete. This bar doesn't tell you the full story because this bar will actually reach full before you're completely done with everything. You can see most everything over here is fully done. We've got a few that are still lagging behind a little bit, but so far, so good. But going back to the games and the most and least successful ones I've had, the least successful ones I've had have made money, as long as I didn't forget the marketing, that is. I have seen the least be around $1.5 million, so still very profitable once you net everything out. The most, somewhere around 250 million is the most money I've made off of a single game. And that was a huge amount. It only happened one time, but I've made 30, 40, 50 million dollars several times on these gaming launches. So keep that in mind. I actually one time made well over $1 trillion on one game, but I'm pretty sure that was a bug. So for realistic purposes, somewhere around 200, 250 million is certainly out there. Who knows? Maybe more than that. All right, now it's time to purchase the physical copies of the game, which is odd because we live in a time where very few physical copies of games are sold anymore. So we can start off with 1,000 units at, and that'll cost us $500. Let's see, how many do we want? I like to go ahead and at least get started with 250. We will have an opportunity to purchase more once we run out, so you don't have to worry too much about it. The one caveat to that is you're going to get most of your sales in the first 2 to 3 days probably, and it's going to spike, and then it's going to for the most part, it'll start to decline from there on out. So you want to make sure you have enough copies at the very beginning. So we'll go with 250,000. We got 21.4K on pre-orders, so 250,000 will probably be more than we need. We'll go ahead and get that going. And let's go ahead and fast forward on the maximum time scale, which is still not too terribly fast when compared to the regular speed. So here also you can see development bar is done, and we still have our story to be finished up. It still lacks just a little bit there. Deadline is quickly approaching. All right, there we go. So we got more gaming studios for sale. You've seen this number as we've been talking, anywhere from 4 to about 6, I believe, as we were talking, but really not that big a deal. Okay, here we go. They want us to delay, really no reason to. It's done. That has popped up every time I've done a game, so it could be some sort of bug, or maybe there is a tiny fraction of a percent that is still out there. So we'll get rid of that. And now already you can see our sales are doing great. So what we're going to do now is close out of this screen. We're going to come back into it and we'll get a graph. So you can see we had our first few days are huge, and then it starts to taper off pretty quickly. So at one point it looked like we were going to need to order more units pretty quickly, but turns out not so much. The good news overall is that our net profit right now is 8.4 million. So we have had a very good game launch, and it's looking like the 250,000 units is right on the mark. We're going to be very close to running out by the time we get to the end of the sales period. So as soon as we get to the end of the sales period, it'll be just like we saw earlier in the video with our previous game, and it'll ask us if we want to go ahead and retire that game. But right now we have 7.7 thousand units still in stock. We've sold 242, almost 243,000 for a net profit of $8.5 million. And of course, for us, most of that was in the cost of getting the physical copies themselves. But $8.6 million is certainly nothing to laugh at when you're making a game, even though that is nowhere near the highest amount I have gotten. So the overall picture is, as far as I'm concerned with games, let's go ahead and hop back out. Games are very simple. If that's all you want to do in this game, you just need a few employees. And again, going back to, we need a sales exec, which we'll go ahead and stop them. We don't really need any more right now and send them on break. But you need a sales exec in order to purchase the game studio. And then after that, you don't even need them until it is time to expand. Then you need a researcher in order to figure out which game topics that you want. And then after that, you really don't need them. And then a marketer, you don't need them for very long. So it's not a very human intensive process from our side of it. The interesting thing is, in a game where we hire programmers and we develop softwares from add-on and features and platforms and all sorts of things, we don't make our own games. So it's a bit odd to have to purchase a game studio and then have no control over that. But that's the way the game works. And if you're looking for an experience that really pares everything down, as opposed to the software contracts and the hardware contracts and the logistics of all of that, then making games may very well be for you. So there we have it. We're ready to archive this particular game and retire it. But our net profit should be profit here, $8.6 million. So our balance continues to rise. And if you have a few of those big game releases, then you can very quickly turn into quite a large company, able to expand as much as you want. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you very much for joining me, and stay tuned for more here at Knee Pit Gaming.